Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hilton True Wealth podcast. I'm Mark Miller, manager of the Hilton Family Office, and today we'll be discussing the wealth blueprints the wealthy use, including tax strategy, liquidity, life insurance, and legacy planning. So really we're going to talk about today, and our objective of today is a challenge of traditional wealth building assumptions and explore why many affluent families, executives, institutions, they prioritize liquidity protection, tax efficiency, and legacy planning alongside, and this is the key, their investment growth. And by the way, nothing I talk about today should be considered investment advice. Do your own research and definitely consult a qualified advisor before you take any actions on what we talk about today. So, what if your biggest financial risk isn't losing money in the markets, but it's building your entire financial future on assets that you can't necessarily access when you need them most? Most Americans, they spend decades building retirement accounts, home equity, investment portfolios, different investments all over the place, yet many wealthy families and institutions use a completely different model and a different strategy when it comes to protecting and transferring their wealth. So in today's episode specifically, we're going to talk about why some experts call traditional retirement planning really paper wealth. The concept of building a financial foundation before chasing returns, super important for the wealthy investor. How permanent life insurance became a wealth building tool. Yes, we're going to talk about that dirty word, life insurance, but I'm going to be talking about it in a completely different way that maybe you haven't heard about before. And we're going to talk about building the four houses of money and what those frameworks or what the frame of the houses actually look like when you build them. Why major corporations and executives use life insurance completely differently. We work with a lot of banks too that tend to use a life insurance in a specific way to help build wealth, not just to have some, death benefit there or something along those lines. And estate planning mistakes that really can destroy your generational wealth building. So let's start with a simple question today. Are you building wealth or are you simply accumulating assets? Think about that. Do you actually have a plan and a structure, a process, and a system to build wealth? Or are you just looking for the next best investment? As I speak today, actually tomorrow, there's going to be one of the biggest IPOs in history, and that's SpaceX. There's a lot of people that have already asked me about that. Should I invest? Should I not invest? And that is in some ways kind of chasing an investment. Is that, it's the hottest thing right now. Everyone's talking about it. Can I get returns? As I'm going to get giant returns or outsized returns from that. That's really the wrong way to, I think, go about things on building your wealth long term. So let's talk about the challenge and the problem of building, quote, paper wealth. For generations, we've been taught, invest in your 401k, max out that 401k, contribute to an IRA, buy a house, build some home equity, invest in mutual funds, and then what? Wait for 20 or 30 years, right? And let's see what happens. Let's see if we can get to the proper results. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing inherently wrong with any one of those types of investments or ways to build wealth. But the question is, are they singularly enough? So let me define what paper wealth means. Paper wealth is simply wealth that looks impressive on a balance sheet or an income statement, but may not be immediately useful for you to maybe stack and build wealth over time. And I'll talk about stacking in a few minutes. So here's an example. Home equity, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, real estate appreciation. So you may have a, let's say, $3 million net worth on paper, but how much cash can you actually access tomorrow? So let's talk about a liquidity test for you and think about this in your own specific situation. If an emergency would happen tomorrow, how quickly could you access, say, six figures without triggering taxes, penalties, loans, meaning interest on loans, or asset sales? Many people discover that their investments are kind of trapped because they can't access those without triggering one of those things I just talked about. Their investments are taxable. Their investments, maybe they're market dependent. I don't want to take any money now, and it happens all the time. We see it with potential clients coming on board. Don't want to take anything now because the markets are down, right? So let's talk about building the proper financial house. So the foundation is some of the things we're talking about, the main things we're talking about today, and that's protection and liquidity. Then the walls are like growth assets over time, and the roof is estate and legacy planning. So most Americans, they build maybe the walls first, and they're not thinking about, it might be more important to think about long term, what is the roof going to look like? If you don't have a roof on a house, you're in real trouble, right? And if you don't have a foundation, you're in real trouble. But again, they focus on the walls before they even have a foundation, before they can even attempt to put a roof on. So wealthy families often build from the foundation up. And the foundation is most important. I always talk about this, and I've talked about it in another podcast. When you build a great wealth building plan, it starts with the foundation, just like the pyramids. There's a reason why they've been around thousands of years, right? So this is an important ask to you. What percentage of your financial life is designed for growth versus protection? By the way, if you're finding some of the things we're talking about helpful so far, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, so you never miss an episode for sure. So here are the 4 homes of the money framework. Every dollar should be evaluated through these 4 lenses. Number 1 is liquidity. How can I get my money? How can I get at my money? Then comes safety. Can I lose it or lose big chunks of it at an inopportune time? Then comes growth. Will it outpace inflation? And keep in mind, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, that inflation is running at probably anywhere from 7 to 10% per year. It's not at 3% per year like the government tells you. And tax efficiency is the final one. How much do I actually keep of my hard-earned dollars? So let's talk about home building number 1. Some people build it like having a bank or through CDs. So what are the strengths here? Well, obviously safety. It's very accessible, especially if you have a lot of cash. And it's very predictable in a sense. But here's the weaknesses: low growth potential and massive inflation erosion, because we're inflating at such a heavy rate right now. So the key question is safety alone enough? So most of the people probably watching this, you're not one to put your money under a mattress, put all your money in a bank. But there are people out there doing that need to hear this. It's not the best option to build wealth long term. So home number 2, Wall Street retirement plans, counting on kind of a traditional or retail way of building your money. Sure, there's good strengths there. Growth potential. Maybe if you're a W-2 employee, or if you've been a W-2 employee at any time, your employer will match in a 401k. And there's some tax advantages too, long term. What are the weaknesses? Of course, market risk. So you're sacrificing safety There's often access restrictions, so you can't get at your money when you want to. And the biggest restriction is, again, when the markets are down. No one wants to take from their portfolios when the markets are down. And future tax uncertainty. That is, if you build in this way, like in IRAs, 401ks, you generally create a giant tax time bomb at the end when you're trying to draw money when you want to pay the least amount of taxes. So the thing here is that tax deferred does not necessarily mean tax free, and you need to very much understand that. That's why we're very focused. We've talked about this again in other podcasts on creating as much tax-free income, both while you're accumulating, but most importantly, when it's time to pull money out down the road. Home number 3 is real estate, building on real estate. So what are the strengths there? Appreciation, leverage, tax deductions, cash flow. We like real estate. We think a portion of your portfolio should probably be there, but what are the weaknesses? Liquidity, market cycles up and down. It's kind of just like the stock market because you have big booms and busts in the real estate market. And management burden if you invest in individual pieces of real estate, commercial real estate, residential real estate. There's a lot involved in management there. So can you spend equity? This is a key question in your current situation without refinancing or selling. Okay, that's important. So that always needs to be looked at because a lot of times people come to us and all of their money is in real estate and they've done well in real estate. They've made a lot of money, but they have a lot of liquidity issues. They have obviously diversification issues. And when things are great, real estate is phenomenal. When things aren't so great in the real estate market, it's really tough. So home number 4. And I'm going to talk about this and dive into this a little bit more because the wealthiest of wealthy, like for instance, the Rockefellers, use a tremendous amount of life insurance to grow assets while members of the family are living, but also to pay out huge bonuses in death benefit when individuals and the family pass away. So what are the potential advantages of, say, permanent life insurance? Tax benefits. Generally, lots of liquidity access. There's a death benefit attached to them. And then there's market protection features. So you don't have to worry when things aren't going well in the economy or in the markets. So why do wealthy families use this for these reasons? Because it really can solve all of these 4 home building scenarios in one. And again, most people don't know this, but it's important that they understand it. So if you divided your wealth among these 4 homes I just talked about, what current percentage lives in each one of these areas? So that's a good thing to do, is to go back and look at that right now and just do a quick sketch on a piece of paper, or if you keep track of your assets in a software or something, what percentages of your assets lie in these different areas. So I'm going to talk about relation, and I want to talk a little bit and go deeper into life insurance as a wealth building tool. And by the way, please know, I'm not talking about bank on yourself and all these retail strategies. I'm going to be talking about high-end, what we call institutionally designed life insurance plans that are not off-the-shelf retail policies that don't perform well, that give you less death benefit, the cash value doesn't grow well, it doesn't give you protection on the downside. Some do, but in general, they're really not the best route to go. So first of all, let's talk about the renting model, since we're talking about homes and all of that. That would be term insurance. And that's a pretty simple concept. That's this very low cost, a very high coverage, and it's a specific time frame. And it can be useful, what we kind of use these for, in conjunction with permanent life insurance for a specified period of time if we need to protect for a specific time frame, okay? These are excellent for young families, for mortgage protection, maybe possibly income replacement if somebody dies prematurely. But again, we can also use them in conjunction with institutionally designed plans to have an add-on to those for a specific reason, maybe to help a business owner or something along those lines. But the term insurance is definitely temporary, and you should understand that and know that. Most term policies expire, and they don't necessarily create an asset. And that's important, an important distinction here. The ownership model in life insurance is permanent insurance that's designed completely differently. Instead of simply transferring risk, it can provide lifetime coverage, build cash value. And by the way, you can use that cash value to do wealth stacking, meaning, by the way, if you pull money out of these permanent policies, you get tax advantages. It's generally tax-free, but then you can use that money and put it elsewhere to work to help build your wealth. So that's what's called stacking. You still have that cash value that's growing, but you're just taking a loan against it. And then the cash value is growing in the policy still. So it can create tax advantages, but also these permanent policies can do a great job in supporting estate planning. Sometimes we can get these policies and they leverage the estate massively to where you could pay a certain amount in on an annual basis. You stop paying after a period of time, and then 20 years down the road, you have a massive death benefit. So when you pass away or it goes on to your heirs, there's 10 million, maybe 20, maybe $30 million sitting that has just been added to the estate. We call that as leveraging. I'm an investment guy, so I tend to look at that from an investment standpoint. Generally, you can invest in these. They're very safe, secure investments. And we maybe can generate if you look on a life expectancy table, an average of 20 to 30% per year just from the death benefit, not to mention what you've done with the cash value and how it's stacked value to build your wealth over time. So that's the ownership model, where you actually own the policy and it becomes part of a wealth building tool for you and your estate long term. By the way, that's what the Rockefellers I mentioned earlier, what they do, what their strategy has been, as soon as someone is born into the Rockefeller family, they buy a giant life insurance policy on them, use an A-rated company, one that's going to be around 100 years from now, if that individual lives to 100 years old. And those cash values can be massive over the years. They can help it build the wealth. But then when that individual passes away, that gigantic death benefit goes into the different trusts that they've set up to help continue the legacy of the Rockefeller family. That's one of the things they've done, as opposed to, say, like the Vanderbilt family. If they would have used life insurance and paid for that, where they had a lot of cash flow in those early years, and for all, especially for the younger members, then probably the Vanderbilts would still have be sitting on massive amounts of wealth like the Rockefellers are. So let's talk about the best type of permanent insurance. Institutionally designed universal life insurance, we believe, is the best. Now, why? First of all, it's generally created to be flexible premiums that you can put in, and the death benefits can adjust over time, depending on if you want to build more wealth inside the cash value or you want a higher death benefit. Specifically, we love some of these institutionally designed, and I use that word again, it's what the smart money people use. The institutions, the banks especially, get indexed universal life. And this is kind of a hybrid approach that attempts to combine protection, growth potential, and the biggest thing is downside protection and how the money is actually being invested. So here's a key question. When does insurance stop being just insurance and become a financial asset? Very good question. So how do you understand this whole IUL institutionally designed indexed universal life concept. Why has it become so popular on the institutional and smart money side? Well, many advisors that are on our side of the business, the Hilton side of the business, address universal life having three kind of major benefits: protecting against market volatility, giving you great protection on tax exposure, and also providing liquidity. So how do these work to do that? Well, first of all, money is not invested necessarily directly in an index, how it says indexed universal life. Instead, the policy performance is tied to overall index performance of several indexes that are picked in an institutionally designed plan. So these have in there, I won't go too into detail on these, but often they have what's called caps, participation rates, so you can't go over certain levels. And it depends on a lot of the insurance companies we work with don't really care about how these cash values or how the money grows in there. So they let you get maximum returns. Some of these we can average 10 to 12% per year over time in that cash value, which I know sounds crazy, but because the insurance company just cares about getting their premium for the actual death benefit. And what we want to do is make that premium really small, but make the amount that you're putting in, the majority of it going in and building the cash value in a very high performing asset growth stance. So let me give you an example how these are protected though. So let's say in the first year, you make 12% in this cash value. So the policy receives that credited growth. But let's say in year two, whatever strategies that have been invested in, index strategies, let's say the market crashes and none of those perform. Let's say it drops 30%. Guess what? You don't participate because there's still guaranteed floors on this. So it basically, they act like they stair step to where you can't lose money, but when the markets are good, you gain money. Now, they do this in a number of ways. I'm not going to go into in too many details here, but basically they're generally buying, say, options. They're expecting it to always go up, but they're buying options on those indexes a lot. So let's say that if they don't make money, then the insurance company loses very little money in that particular year, so they can afford to absorb that and give you a 100% guarantee that you won't go down in that policy. So instead of losing the prior gains, the floor mechanism prevents that negative crediting, which a lot of people don't understand that, but it's huge. So when we invest with our clients, like in the True Wealth portfolios, what's the biggest thing that we're trying to do? We're trying to eliminate as much downside pressure and loss on the portfolio as possible. That way, we can get all the positive gains and then get a really good average rate of return over time. So we want to minimize. If we can in these to eliminate that downside pressure, then all we're concerned about is doing a really good job of picking those right indexes on the upside, and then over time getting a great average rate of return. And that's why I mentioned earlier. Again, I'm not guaranteeing these returns, but we have seen in some of these advanced institutionally and smart money policies that they can really average really high rates of return in that cash value buildup. So what appeals most to the wealthy folks? Well, protection from major downturns, we were just talking about that. By the way, these are also designed for tax-deferred growth, and then access to capital in the form of loans, in other ways that they can pull out of the cash value and then use it however they want to use it. So, but what matters more, in your opinion, if you think about this? Maximizing returns or avoiding devastating losses? If you've watched any of my podcasts, I hope you answer number two. So if we can eliminate those devastating losses, we don't have to worry about making, these huge rates of return every year to average a great rate of return on portfolios long term. So what are the wealthy and corporations, banks, what are they doing and how are they using these strategies? Well, they often use them for like executive compensation plans, deferred compensation, split dollar arrangements, corporate owned life insurance. Most big companies and all banks generally have large policies of these types that are helping them not only protect their monies that they have, especially in their capital and surpluses that they might have in the companies, but they're also using them to generate wealth long term because they're very flexible and they can be a part of wealth. So let me explain real quick too, and I'll talk a little bit more about the corporations. But really, kind of a good wealth plan is that's not bad at all. Is to maybe have your investments. First of all, you need to have a liquidity layer, then have your investments. Then you might want to take some of your money and invest in real estate. And then maybe part of that should be using and leveraging life insurance both while you're living and when you pass away to be in your portfolio, okay? So basically, corporations use life insurance not because they're making emotional decisions. And by the way, banks, big corporations don't do that. They have processes. They use them because they're extremely strategic and help them build wealth in many different ways. And they really care they care more even than individuals about tax efficiency, making sure they have proper cash reserves and balance sheet strength. In a previous podcast, you might want to go back and take a look. In some of our podcasts, we talk about thinking like a corporation would think to build wealth, not how an emotional individual would think, because individuals are drawn and I'm going to have a podcast about kind of emotions and how they can hurt you so much when it comes to investing and everything. But think more like a CFO of a company would think. They have a more of a balance sheet focus than they do an individual investment type of focused. So my question is, maybe should you and your family think more like an institution? On the family office side, technically family offices, since we're on the institutional side, we're thinking in that way for the individual families. So I also want to talk about kind of an estate planning wake-up call. And specifically talk about wealth creation versus wealth transfer to the next generation. Building wealth is difficult. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes a process, it takes a plan, it takes a team, all these things we've talked about before. So, but keeping it across generations is even harder. And that's what we teach our clients and we help them. And I'm not talking, by the way, you may not have multi-millions of dollars listening to this podcast. That's fine. Our goal is wherever you are to help you to get to that place more efficiently and faster. So, but some estate planning challenges are obviously federal and state taxes, probate delays, liquidity shortages. I want to speak personally to this because my father, who by the way was a banker and kind of maybe knew better, but he did not have a good estate plan set up. And because he did not do that, it took us 7 years to administer his estate and get it finished. And there were massive problems along the way. And by the way, the lawyers got about 25% of that estate when it was all said and done. We don't want those things to happen. So it's important, no matter what level of wealth you're at, you should have an excellent estate plan in place so we can avoid some of those pitfalls. So the hidden problem kind of when when someone passes away is generally taxes need to be paid immediately in cash. And if you've got buildings, land, business ownership, stock certificates, all of those type of things, those things have to be liquidated, and often that is the worst time to liquidate them. So a plan has to be in place to do that. So let me talk about a real world scenario here. Imagine that you had a, let's say $10 million estate when it's all said and done. And you may have a lot of years left to be able to build that. And with the right help, you probably can. So it's a $10 million estate. Let's say it's mostly real estate. You own a business or a couple businesses. You've got limited cash. So the heirs immediately then may be forced to borrow against that, have to pay interest on that to borrow. They have to sell assets immediately. They might have to liquidate the business. And again, I go back to that's the worst possible time. All of that needs to be handled ahead of time. There's a little bit of complexity there, but you want a team that knows how to handle that and knows where the pitfalls are going to be. So when you pass away, you can in the most easy way possible to be able to plan ahead of time so you don't have, again, those pitfalls. So why is life insurance frequently used in these situations? To provide immediate liquidity, estate equalization across all of your assets, debt payoff, maybe trust funding, making sure there's plenty of money there for plenty of money to go to each of the heirs and to be able to transfer it on properly. So the question I ask you, what is your plan for transferring wealth? Not just creating it. We tend to be focused on just getting the best investment at the best time. What's your plan for transferring your wealth? So let's kind of close with some key takeaways here. Lesson number one is wealth is more than net worth. It's more than what's just on paper, and liquidity matters. Keep that in mind and do that liquidity exercise I talked about earlier. Lesson number two is tax efficiency. It can be just as important, if not more important, as your investment returns. I cannot emphasize that enough times in all my podcasts. Lesson number three is protection should be part of every great wealth strategy. And lesson number four is the wealthy often focus, and I pound away at this, structure processes before growth. If you're still focusing on growth, you need to make that mind shift if you truly want to be wealthy. So here's a final challenge to you before we leave today. How much of your wealth is liquid? How much is protected? How much is tax efficient? How much will transfer smoothly to your heirs? And do you even know that? Are you on top of that? Because the bottom line is true wealth isn't measured by what you accumulate. It's measured by what you keep, what you control, and what you successfully pass on. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Hilton True Wealth. If you want to learn more about topics relating to building your wealth, tax planning, cutting-edge tech, and family office services, we're here to help. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode, and give us a like or a review. And if you're curious to learn more about your wealth, tune in every Tuesday for new insights and special guests. If you found value in what you heard today, share it with someone who might benefit too. For more insights, resources, and to get a free copy of our book, Hilton Wealth, How to Invest Like an American Dynasty, visit us at hiltonwealth.com. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building your true wealth.